Welcome to Transformational Blueprints, the podcast that's here to tackle the big question. Why do so many transformation programs fall short, and what can we do about it? I'm Mario Michaels, founder and director of Synaxia Group, and I'm thrilled to have you join me. In this series, we go beyond theory, bringing you first-hand stories and insights from some of the world's top architecture and transformation leaders. It's all about sharing real-world lessons, sparking fresh ideas, and giving back to the architecture community. So whether you're looking to learn, be inspired, or stay ahead of the curve, grab your coffee, settle in, and let's dive in together. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking to Dennis Mulder about architecture excellence. Dennis is a seasoned technology leader with over 25 years of experience in driving digital transformation, IT optimization, and business innovation. As the CEO of a boutique global consultancy firm and founder of First Circle IT, Dennis specializes in aligning cutting-edge technology strategies with business needs to achieve operational excellence and unlock growth opportunities. A former CTO of Microsoft Netherlands and VP of Customer Success at Volumes, Dennis has a proven track record of leading impactful initiatives across AI, cloud storage, and IT architecture. He's a certified distinguished IT architect and an active mentor in the community. Dennis is passionate about advancing the IT profession and empowering organizations to thrive in the digital age, with a focus on delivering measurable outcomes and fostering innovation. Dennis brings valuable insights and actionable expertise to every discussion he has. In his spare time, he's also the chapter lead of the Chief Architecture Forum for Netherlands and also the president of Netherlands for ISA. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me and having me, Mario.
No problem at all. So we always like to start, I know I've given quite an in-depth background there, but how did you get to where you are, Dennis?
Yeah, so a little bit over 25 plus years ago, I was still studying, it's actually more 27 now. I was studying computer science, didn't like the studies much, so started to work on the side. The company I worked for was in transition from traditional CD-ROM, CDI into the internet world. Rolled into the Microsoft ecosystem and started to run teams and got intrigued about, how do you properly design software? And that led me into the Microsoft ecosystem where I spent 16.5 years. And a year ago or so, I was like, it's about time in the second half of my career to more of an entrepreneurial journey with all the experience and scars I gained.
Fair enough. And what's your scope at Weave then as the CEO, and why are Weave different?
So Weave is actually a network of independent architects worldwide.
Okay.
And I run the company. I compare it a lot often to medicine, right? Where there's a group of surgeons, like say heart surgeons in a hospital with a practice lead that's still practicing surgery, right? He's still doing surgery every other day, maybe. That's me, right? So the company is run by architects, and we focus on applying our scars, as I like to say it, right? The experience that we've gained in the triangle of strategy, business, and technology. We're in the middle of basically translating strategy to execution through architectural excellence. Where we're different there is we don't get too involved in the technology or the implementation of it. I mean, the execution side, because there I see there's a little bit like with traditional consultancies, right? That's where most money is made, honestly. Yeah. But that's also where it goes wrong, because you need to tie it to that business outcome, to addressing the business need. If you do that right, you build the right thing, you architect the right thing, then you can say much more about the actual execution. And if you don't have a financial incentive in it, you'll do what's right for the client. Yeah. That's really where we're different. And that's where we weave the things together. That's
nice.
Where the name.
See what you did. Very good. So, as a custom with series 2 of Transformational Blueprints, you have a question to answer from our previous guest, who was Simon Lessard. The question is, which professional relationship or mentorship experience in your career most contributed to your career, and why?
Yeah, so this is still top of mind for me because I always applied myself when I coach or mentor other people. And that came from Uli Hohmann. Uli is a distinguished architect, corporate vice president at Microsoft. He reports to a board member at Microsoft and has been a long time mentor of mine. And he always said in my career, like when I came up with like a new role, this particular was at Microsoft, how does this bring you to your next station? So in his opinion, right, a step that you take, you already have to know what's the step after.
After it, yeah.
What are you going to learn here?
Yeah.
That brings you closer to, well, your ultimate goal.
The next goal, which then leads you to the ultimate goal, potentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
In my case, honestly, I started to do entrepreneurial work really where my next goal is I would live in Italy and retire there. So sort of part of the next step. On the other hand, I really also, want to give back, if you will, right? I think I've been fortunate to get a lot of experience in this space, and giving back to the younger generation is another thing that I'd like to do. So hence, I coach a lot of people in startups, but also in like early stages of their career. I've done that ever, and I still do that. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So linking into that then, coaching and mentoring the younger generation without putting an age on it, but people who are earlier on in their architecture career, what do you think makes a great architect in today's world then?
Yeah, so I compare architecture often, just like I did earlier with medicine and a lot of other professions, if you will.
Yep.
Like you cannot become an architect through graduating at school, in my opinion. You need to get that experience, just like in medicine, right? Where you're trained as a general practitioner often in university. You still have to, tag along with other doctors to learn the profession or the art of the profession even. That's why I also said I talk about scars, right? Getting these early on experiences throughout your career will shape how you think about the next project or program that you're involved in. That's why I also believe so much in that in IT architecture, maybe even generically speaking in IT, we need better definitions of what a role entails. Actually, we need a proper set of skills, a set of competencies that you need to have at a certain level to be called an architect for it if we pick that role. But the same is true for many other roles. It's actually very ironic, right? Where, okay, the IT industry is young, but if we run the global economy, I would argue.
Yeah.
Basically,
absolutely.
we do. And then everybody, including myself, by the way, we self-proclaim a title. CTO of Netherlands. It literally was self-proclaimed because the title did not really exist in a subsidiary.
Yeah.
But what makes me a CTO? What makes me, right? Why do I have? Can I say that based on skills and experience and competencies? And this is like in my free time, I do stuff for ISA. Actually, my company is stooled on the ISA way of thinking. I believe in IT we need to get to that profession where you can actually compare across consultancies, but also across architects in large enterprises. Like, this is a certified person. And there, of course, we have a lot of certifications, like all the cloud providers have certifications. You have TOGAF as a certification around the methodology, but that does not necessarily say much about your expertise and experience. So what I like about the ISA certification, and the Open Group actually has a similar one, it's a board level certification where you have to go up in front of other people in the industry, other architects that certify you, much more like medicine.
So on that On that
Yeah.
note, that would need a global collaboration of every business or every group to get together and say we believe a solution architect should have these skills and competencies, and this is how we assess them, and this is what we expect to see during that assessment. So that's quite an ordeal task, but absolutely, like once you standardize it, then you'll move away from this whole identity crisis that there is with architects at the moment, which is they're a nice to have. Some sit in their ivory tower and don't provide value. Some take 6 months to put together their designs, and actually, it shouldn't take that long, and so on and so forth. So I get, it'd be amazing if that could happen, but that's and what I suppose, what benefits would a professional register, because that's what we're talking about here, aren't we? Talk about professional register. What benefits would that bring to IT architecture if you're an architect going into it?
So I believe this will raise the bar, the quality bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
We read a lot about failed IT projects and projects that didn't meet the business goals or were too expensive. I think with any profession, right? Be it
Yeah,
law, medicine, building architecture, well, actually literally any profession, over time their standards popped in, and
yeah,
you have to set sort of, or a bar is set until you can do
yeah,
certain work. And with IT running the global economy, I think a lot of people will agree. I think it's ironic that we're not there yet. At the same time, the industry is young, right?
yeah,
50
yeah,
years, 50 years, 75 years, maybe, if you
yeah.
stretch it. And it has grown so fast that it hasn't settled yet. And I don't know if I will experience it in my lifetime that we
Yeah.
settle on it, because every discussion between architects ends up in an argument.
In and out, yeah, exactly. Well, it's really difficult to do, isn't it? Because you've got, the goals of a larger organization. Let's say, I don't know, a 10,000 plus employee retail business is going to be different to a young fast fashion online retailer. But the role of an architect will also be different as a result of that, in terms of what they're trying, not necessarily what they're trying to achieve, but how they go about delivering it, right?
True, but the stance of ISA is that if you're an architect, there's 5 core pillars of knowledge you need.
Okay.
And I'll briefly walk through them at various levels of importance, I guess.
Yeah.
But one, and it's uncommon. A lot of people, I always joke, a lot of people think an IT architect draws boxes and arrows.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the design
Yeah.
pillar in ISA. Another really key one in my mind, which is why I talk about that triangle, right? Strategy, business, and
Yeah.
technology, is business, technology, strategy is what. But there you look at skills in the space of things like understanding a business,
Yeah.
understanding the financial side of the business.
Okay.
How do you make a business case? How do you sell internally or as
Yeah.
a consultant? How do you sell it to a business that change
Yeah.
needs to? Can you understand what's happening in the economy and in the industry and translate that to that business?
Yeah.
Industry knowledge, industry analysis. How do you do
Yeah.
that? How do you analyze a company in the first place? I always say, to just as a reference to the younger people, right? I always say, if you run into a new customer, especially if you're in the consulting or
Mhm.
technology vendor side, read a financial report of the
Yeah.
client. You'll get so much out of that that
Yeah.
makes you relevant, right? So that's business, technology, strategy. I already gave away the other one, design.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
obvious, right? And then another key one that I would even rate higher than design is human dynamics. How do you
Yeah.
communicate?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you
Absolutely.
communicate your ideas? How do you how do you create a stakeholder map and
Mm.
understand who to talk to get your ideas across, to get
Yeah.
buy-in onto your ideas? How do you lead a team? Do you write it? Do you present it? Can you
Yeah.
present, right? All these type of skills. So business, technology, strategy, human dynamics, design, and the other two are rather more technical, I would say. One is quality attributes or non-functional things. Like that's where architects really need to make trade-offs, right? Does it have to be a simplistic scenario, right? A performance system or secure? Well, obviously the balance, especially nowadays with the cybersecurity threats, etc., is somewhere in the middle. But you need, where's the bar? And how do you operate the system when it's in production? It's another sort of trade-off. And then, all the categories that you have in the illities, right? The illities is what I often call it, right? The functional requirements, the stability, etc., maintainability, etc. And then the last one is actually, when I talk to Paul Price, the founder of CEO of ISA, it's sort of a lump sum category in my mind. It's called IT environment. And that's where there are skills around, for example, project management, or application development or infrastructure development and things like that. That a lot of those skills fit into the various specializations in architecture, right? Obviously, someone that comes from the infrastructure side is a little weaker in software design and software art. If you've never led a project, you're a little weaker in technical project management. But what I say stating is you have to be at a certain level, at a professional level. That's the first board exam, the CDP, to across all the pillars, basically. And of course, you can have a weaker pillar and you can have skills within it that are weaker, but on average, you need to be at the professional level and show that from experience to the board. Hence, you can get that board cert when you've done computer science 6 years university. You have to have your miles in, right? At large projects, because you have to talk about your first project, your worst project, your last project.
What did you do? What were the outcomes? What was your role in that? And
across the show, you have the experience.
So effectively, it's like an interview, isn't it? A lot deeper level, obviously.
Well, it feels like you're on the barbecue.
Fair enough.
Wait, maybe is that interesting to talk a little bit about? So you have 3 or 4 architects in front of you. You present, then you get questions, but they're question rounds. 2 rounds of 4 times 10 minutes of questions. And I always joke it feels like interrogation.
Well, you should. If you're trying to standardize something, the level of the level has to be higher and a lot more in depth. Otherwise, you're just recreating TOGAF or something like that, which we're not trying to do. We're trying, you're trying to do something different.
And TOGAF, while very valid, fits way more in in the design pillar and a little bit in the environment pillar. It is a tool. A methodology, rather. Something you do. It doesn't say anything about your experience. You learn that.
It's like a guideline or framework of how to makes sense. And I suppose that leads us really nicely onto
your expertise.
And that leads us really nicely onto the whole purpose of this episode around architectural excellence and getting from strategy to execution by applying architecture excellence. What does applying architecture excellence look like when moving from strategy to execution?
So this is where I'm very opinionated, right? The large scale business consultancy companies focus on strategy. I always joke they get you 150 slides for $1 million. And there's nothing wrong with that, as in, these people have experience, have seen other companies in your industry, etc. But they produce they help you produce a go-to-market strategy, a strategy around, what's your business look like? And then often, I have seen many large enterprises from the bottom up, from the business and technology side, the people come in and have to do the change, have to implement it, whatever it is, right? And more often than not, supported by IT. Those people are typically not don't have the experience in the strategy.
Yeah.
In general, they're at least not the McKinsey consultant.
Yeah.
Or the business consultant. And I see an issue in the translation of that. Also,
Okay.
a lot of people there are not always interested in it. They just want to do their nice Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah.
So for me, the architect's role is to bridge the chasm from from business to technology, kind of in that, or business to solution in that triangle, by letting them, but driving it from the strategy, right? So the strategy hopefully addresses the business needs of the organization, or sometimes the business problems. I'd like to be positive, but the business or the business opportunity, because they're disrupted by their competitor. That's what the strategy would say, like, okay, this is what we'll do. And then you have to have, and I don't think the 150 slides work. You have to be able to communicate at every level in the organization. What does it take for that person? What does that person have to contribute to make that happen? Strategy to what are we executing? And there we have to be much more pragmatic, in my mind.
Okay.
Right? There are so many canvases, business model canvas, and you have customer journeys, and all these things that some of them are also in architectural methodologies. But you have to be pragmatic in applying these, creating them, but more often than not, using them to communicate. That's where the human dynamics pillar of I makes so much sense, right? Traditional enterprise architecture, when I think about it, what I've seen in large organization, and I'm not dismissing whole enterprise architects here, often they're not in that triangle. They're on the side producing architecture. You called it out earlier in the ivory tower, defining standards and principles for the organization to adhere to. And they're not well enough connected into that triangle, into programs. That's when I think architecture fails in a lot of companies. And more often than not, it's actually caused by management who doesn't understand how to apply architecture well. So that's what I'm trying to, disrupt, if you will.
But also on that, sorry to interrupt, you're right around the management piece, but also the structure of the organization and the hierarchy, without using that word, as in where people sit. So, there's a big argument at the moment around where does enterprise architecture sit? And, a new job title has popped up in the past 12 months around EITA, enterprise IT architect, versus a EA, and are we now just, is that EITA just a senior solution architect if they're that involved within technology, and so on and so forth. So back to your original point, you've got the triangle and EA sits to the side. Well, that's probably because that's where the organization sits, EA. But you're right, in terms of human dynamics, it's their role and responsibility to get involved in that. Right, what's the strategy? What I'm really keen on is, and this is where a lot of people, from my perspective, I'm looking at it from a talent angle, and the people that I represent and the companies that I represent. And one of the challenges I always have is, how do you bridge that gap between strategic plans and practical implementation? Like, what could you give us an example or a couple of examples of where somebody has stepped out of their ivory tower, so to speak? I'm not saying that people do, but and actually done something around, or what does that practical implementation look like?
So here's where I'm a big fan of ISA again. ISA has created the business technology architecture body of knowledge.
Okay.
It's GitHub, it's open source. It's text, actually, and canvases. It's a collection of best practices from architects around the world. It's basically a set of things you produce, deliverables. They call them including the Osterwalder things like the business model canvas is there. I think it's all about documenting and talking the language of all the stakeholders in the whole mix, and making it simpler through documentation and using that as a communication vehicle where you understand the person you're talking to and placing it in their context. So I'm also a big fan of analogies. People don't always get security, but when you start to talk about the guy in front of the bar, right, who's letting one person in and the other not, and he kicks you out, or talking about the road and speeding and where controls, the police and what do you call them, flashlight, speed traps, etc.
Right? Cameras.
That becomes more fun as well as better understood. So really focusing on communications using these canvases is also very helpful, because there you kind of lock what has been agreed. You put in front a business model canvas, you put a customer journey in, you come up with a persona card that describes where this client we're addressing. A lot of very common practices also in things like design thinking and also in a lot of business consultancy. But subsequently, we have to connect that to the solution architecture. Why are we doing this in the cloud in the first place? Is that because the technologists only know that, or that's the only thing they want? That's, in my opinion, solution looking for problem that a lot of technology companies do, right? We're doing it with SAP or with Dynamics because that's what we know. Or do you look from the business needs into the market and decide and track, why did you make that decision? Is that because of that requirement, or is that because we're being disrupted, or is that because whatever the reason is?
We want to reduce costs or whatever it may be.
And make sure that you take along the organization that is the decision, because there's a lot of disruption coming from the bottom up, right? Technology companies. I worked for arguably the one of the largest, right? Where we're trying to push in new tech because that's good for Microsoft. But sometimes those technology vendors forget about what it is about in terms of business. So that is what it is about. And for that, we have in the Bitterbox, the business technology architecture, better body of knowledge, the structured canvas approach, which is a set of 20 canvases that any project should just have. And we've seen that brings solution architects more connected to the business, and the business architects more connected to the solution architect. That's a cross chasm.
And that would then create a gap, because what I'm seeing a lot in my world is, especially with solution architecture, is a lot of engineers who are software engineers, and quite rightfully thought, I don't want to manage a team, but I want to be really close to the technology. I'm going to go and become a software architect and then a solution architect. And that career progression is quite linear. It's like, right, okay, well, I've been doing software architecture now for 3 years. What's the next step? Solution architect. Okay, they're doing really the same job, but it's a different job title with a pay rise. And then it's enterprise architecture, and it's because that's the natural step upwards, and that's not necessarily right, because those 3 jobs are completely different. But what you're saying is, if you can go to this place where, right, okay, you're now moving away from the software, you obviously still need to know about the software, not going to teach you to suck eggs here, but it now becomes about, is that software the right software for our business based on where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do? And if not, just because you don't know about, your expertise is .NET, for example, and that's what the platform's built on. However, is there another part of the business that can be developed in Python because it needs to be more data orientated for whatever? As a solution architect, right back to your original point with the framework for ISO, is you need to know enough about everything, but not detail, because there's going to be somebody else who's going to do the detail and the execution and the delivery. Your job is to go and scope it out and make sure it aligns to the business needs and problems and challenges.
Exactly. That is our architecture. And I often see people early on in their career who've been amazing developers growing into leading a lead developer, leading a
Yeah.
team, becoming software architects, stuck in the design pillar.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of quality attributes they typically also get. But the human side and the business side
Yeah.
is often lacking or missing, and often there's not enough interest. But I would go as far as you're not an architect if you not also look at that.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So, what key steps ensure architecture contributes effectively to execution success? And we've spoken a couple of things around there. So, if you've done the strategy, you're an architect, whether chief enterprise solution, whatever. You've done the strategy. We've got the strategic plans. We've got what we're going to do around practical implementation. Now, how do we ensure that architecture contributes effectively to that execution success?
So you cannot run away, is my answer here. Often, if
Okay.
it's the right project, it's actually a change in the organization, right? That's also what I always recommend. Connect the architecture department to whatever your change organization looks like, because they have to. Yeah, it is about implementing change in the addresses business need. Now I lost my train of thought a little. What was the question?
Key steps that architecture contributes
You
effectively.
have that whole picture. You have the structured canvases.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what needs to happen. So stay connected with it. I've seen a lot of architects also. So I'm done. Here's my architecture.
Yeah.
It's like a building architect, right?
Go and deliver it.
The blueprints and going on to the next project.
Yeah.
Architects also in the building space stay connected. And you could even make the analogy with a surgeon, a heart surgeon, right?
Yeah.
The surgery is done, but he still sees the patient.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do. We have to, as architects, monitor. I'd like to say that the train stays on the track.
Yeah.
Because it will hop off because of a person or a change in the business, or something will happen that will make people do things that were not intended to happen. And often it may be for valid reasons, right? If you're sidetracked because of a competitor thing, you do have to look at, like, how does this impact our project? How does this change the architecture maybe? Hence, you have to stay involved, but maybe not as intense as in the beginning or something like that, right? You can oversee. So what I generally do with my clients a lot, also in my previous role where we would run a large transformation, cloud transformation, it was with Microsoft. We would have people that sit in the steering committee, etc. as well, where we get sort of the sensor data out of the project and can escalate quickly and things like that. But running away is the worst thing you can do as an architect, or running away or moving on to the next shiny object is not the right approach.
Where do you think an architecture practice should sit? And we've not discussed this before, so this is kind of off piece, but where do you think an architecture practice should sit within an organization? And I know there's a lot of nuances, size of organization, where they're at in their journey as a business. Are they implementing change? Well, change is the new BAU anyway. If you're not doing change on a daily basis, then you somebody else is, and you may as well be going backwards. But where do you see it at? Because historically, architecture sits within technology, and most of our conversation today has been around that. That's one of 5 pillars.
So again, here I'm very opinionated. I did hint on it when I lost my train of thought a bit. In my opinion, first thing, if you're a technology business, and almost every business is, and I would go again and argue with almost every CEO, like, you're a technology business. If your business runs on technology, first you need someone in the board that has a background in technology.
Yeah, of course,
Ideally, it's actually someone with sort of the architecture competencies as well. I would argue someone that has been in change in technology land. I would say the chief architect the leader of the architect team, and in smaller organizations, that may be a combined role with an actual architect, needs to report to that person. So still on the tech side, I would say. But I've also seen success with other, in particular in finance, where it would sit, that person would also have a bit of a larger org, where it's actually a change organization. So it's architecture, but often also like I always call them the pit bulls, the program managers that drive change, right?
Yeah.
You don't want a Labrador there. You want a pit bull.
Yeah.
So in that there, I believe it needs to sit. And I would not necessarily call it an enterprise architecture anymore, because enterprise architecture is, the name says it is about the enterprise. It's much more about the processes and the capabilities of the entire organization than it is about tech. The name says it, but we completely diluted it. So I don't use that term anymore. Actually, I don't like any prefix.
What do you use?
An architect. Architect.
You just like architects
or something like that. Something that says something about the experience, not about the scope or the tech.
But what about the different levels that you alluded to right at the beginning?
So where I've seen great success, in particular in Dutch banks, is they always have 3 persons running a tribe. An architect, a program manager, and more of a, let's, for the sake of argument, call it more of a business person.
A BA or business analyst,
Someone understands that domain. Say it's in a car insurance domain, right?
Fine.
Car insurance systems. If the domain the business person that understands the processes, etc., and a program manager, the pit bull that runs the tribe.
To go and drive it.
That's another way to organize and put that more in the business lines. But then if you do that type of organization, you have to make sure that domain architects across all domains, across your business units, have a community. Look at synergy across on the technology side, for example. And those domain architects' key role, so again, it's business aligned, right? Domain, customer facing domain, or the supply chain domain. They are the leaders of the solution architects. I would. And if it's big enough, also business architects, etc. Where you make sure you cross that chasm. That's, I believe, the right model. And also, from all of the, safe and agile movements, etc. From that thinking, you've seen this notion of tribe with the triangle. Come up with it myself, but I cannot take credit. But in the evolution of agile, the role of architecture, I think, fits there. But also really at the top, not at the bottom. Then it will.
Really interesting. So your background at Microsoft was very heavily involved in cloud, obviously. So we're going to talk about quite a hot topic at the moment. This year, it's on many CIOs and technology leaders' agenda around. We've done this whole, we're going to move to cloud because it's really cost effective, etc. Then move the full estate onto cloud, and then now we're probably in this era of actually it's not as cheap as we thought. So now we're going to move to more of a hybrid model, or we're going to change it, or whatever it may be. So how can effective architecture help optimize cloud costs?
So in my mind, and I've said that when I started in cloud 15 plus years ago, you have to architect for cost. It's one of the trade-offs. And that is not happening enough because there's no pain. Like in the technology side of the organization, you don't have to pay the bill. And in many organizations, you don't even see the bill. So if there's no carrot or stick, ideally both, it won't happen. right? People just click the, oh shit, do I now take the premium or the standard? And actually the cloud vendors abuse it a little.
Yeah.
As in, right? It's simpler to click the premium button.
Yeah.
You need that one feature you think, right?
Yeah.
Not sure, so better take it. And then all of these deployments, especially at large organizations, are lump summed into a massive bill
Yeah.
that the CIO signs up for. He has no clue at the detail level who uses what.
Yeah.
If you organize it yourself properly, you will know with what business, hopefully even what system is using what. But what is good? What is cheap enough? What is right? So
what we're expecting the impact to be and so on. Yeah.
So there you need, and again, the same analogy, you need a police force, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
That will check and fine you and.
Yeah. So who do you go for, the pit bull or the architect?
There could be that those persons need to have sort of an architecture hat.
Yeah.
They're called FinOps specialists, etc. But I've seen good success if the person actually can understand the workloads also. Like it's not an Excel tiger.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Because if you understand the workloads relatively easy and have those well documented, he will poke holes in, like, why are you using that standard thing? Or why are you running everything on IaaS while there's this beautiful PaaS service? Or the other way around often as well. We're tech savvy. Why don't we manage this portion of the tech stack ourselves? Because the cloud provider has put a premium on top of that managed service. Right? So all, again, trade-offs. And,
so what
this is something I lately have been specializing more and more on. I think time to do IT optimization, in particular in cloud, across architecture, cost, performance often as well, to drive down cost, right? There's a lot of alternatives that will increase performance, for example, on the storage side, that's my role at Volumes, which will drive down the cost. But the flip side is you have to do a little bit more technology management yourself to optimize. Again, a trade-off.
And you said right at the beginning, cloud should be optimized purely for cost, and that makes absolute sense. So what are the,
not purely, but if you do it up front,
one of the main reasons you're doing it is
else it will go haywire, especially if you don't show back and don't provide the insights and don't have to.
So what are the smartest strategies then for cost optimization, specifically within cloud architecture?
It's all about data. Right. Getting the telemetry out and actually combining data points, right? Workload or business data points, right? How many orders are flowing through the system and what's the price per order?
Yeah.
If you can answer that question, then you're talking about margin in the end.
Yeah.
For the business. And the lower the cost per order on the side, the better margins you'll get. And rarely do people get there. But that is also about combining data from the actual application and the domain to the technology data, the telemetry, the CPU usage, and the storage consumption, etc. And there, the cloud providers have done the obvious things, right? You turn off the machine in the weekend, or here's a set of disks that have not been used for X time, or hey, this is a really big VM, the utilization is low, maybe you should go to another one.
Yeah.
Architectural level optimization, barely happens, I guess.
Yeah.
But I would argue, like, if you do proper assessment, data-driven assessment, like also through the cloud providers' APIs and combine things,
should be able to.
Yeah. So I know of a case, for example, where a client of an optimization tool was using a data import technology, data factory. but there were failed runs.
Okay.
Somehow there was a failure, was not monitored properly, and was much more costly than if it would have succeeded, because the standard way, what happens, it will retry. But now
Okay.
it will retry every minute. Instead of run every day once,
Yeah.
it will retry every minute. So the
And that
meter,
costs.
the cloud side, will run.
Yeah. Okay.
Hence, you also need to design for operations, right? This is more of an operational misfit, I would say. It should have not gone unnoticed. You would not, if you did that properly, you need a tool to tell you.
Of course.
But yeah.
Okay. And I was going to ask you for an example, and that's sort of an example of where it didn't work. But are you able to share an example of how smart architecture choices reduced cloud expenses?
Yeah, well, maybe a little pitch then on my other side job at Volumes. Volumes hired me to do some customer success work. Volumes is a startup in block storage, disks.
Okay.
The low level.
Yeah.
There, in the hospital electronic health record space, right?
Okay.
Patient records. The larger the hospital, the larger the set of patients, but also larger the set of practitioners, surgeons, etc. So the more users. So this is typically kind of a scale-up architecture model, right? You need a bigger database, you need bigger, etc. In this space, cloud migration has not really happened a lot yet, right? Primarily due to regulatory constraints, I would argue, and privacy concerns, etc.
Yeah.
Not necessarily valid, I would say. But
Yeah.
Understand it's tougher in an industry like that. But there's also technical constraints. Like systems like this are very chatty to the database, right? They go back and forth to get tiny bits of data. Well, in the cloud, compute and storage are not anymore next to each other. Like on-prem, the storage array would sit on the CPU almost with a fiber channel in between. So the latency in cloud between machines and between cloud compute and storage is much higher, actually.
Okay.
On-prem, you see 30 microseconds. In cloud, it's 800 microseconds or a millisecond. And many systems don't bother, but systems where the user interface is immediately connected to the data and it's very chatty, it does add up. So there, it makes sense to look at more optimized storage capabilities to drive down that latency, which often also allows you to drive down compute cost.
Yeah.
Because in the cloud, you also have to over-provision often to get the IOPS, right? To get enough performance from another service or another from the storage system. You sometimes have to have more bandwidth. But they need a bigger VM. But on the compute side, the CPU, you get 64 more CPUs.
Okay.
Need, because you only need the bandwidth. So there, in this space, I see a lot of movement also in optimizing, not only for cost, but also for performance. And through that, like positioning a different storage platform will drive down compute cost. And in the case I'm thinking of in electronic health records, it allows cloud vendors to address the larger systems that cannot be moved for either economical or purely tech/performance reasons.
Okay. Makes sense. Thanks very much for that. So we're going to move on to our quick fire questions now. What do you expect in 2025 will be a game changer from a technology perspective?
It's all about AI. All about AI. I think every company at every level needs to rethink what can I do smarter. And I think IT has always done that over the past, how many years, 60 plus years.
Yeah. But this is supercharged.
Is I don't know, it's an accelerator or something like that.
Yeah, 100%.
Also, the architecture space, right? What can you do with AI?
Well, if we go back to our original discussion, sorry, not original, the beginning of the discussion, this makes the role of an architect ever more important, because it's right, these are the business goals. Do we need, I don't know, that many people, or do we need that, or do we need that? Actually, no, AI can do that, right? Okay, let's go away and upskill ourselves on what this can do, and right, let's think about the security and so on. So the role of an architect for me is going to be amplified, because it's their job to go and figure this out really, and put the solution together.
And
So
again, there's a lot of trade-offs here.
yeah, of course it is. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Any advice you wish you received early on in your career?
Any advice I wish I received early on in my career? Sorry, I didn't think well about that. So many.
I suppose, what's the number one advice you're giving to your mentors, your mentorees? So
One thing that I learned early on, and wish I would have learned maybe earlier, is,
Yep.
and this is a tip I always give people, is I think there's an immense amount of power by doing internships, like
Yeah.
running internships, bringing in the next generation. They come up with new ideas that you didn't think of. And how I've used it throughout my career also is things I didn't have time for.
Mm-hmm.
I would make an intern
Yeah.
do it, right? And you would spend weeks, months often, and in hours I would learn from that person.
Yeah.
In the context of whatever the business I was in.
Okay.
Right? Instead of like research generic
Yep.
thing, it was always a bit about applying. I guess I lost a few years early on
Yeah.
not to.
But yeah,
I
you
did
need to do that. Yeah. Okay. And from a talent perspective, what's the biggest change you expect to see over the next 5 years?
I would tie it again to AI, but let me generalize. I think the most successful technologists understand how computers work.
Yeah.
I learned as of late that a lot of universities and schools don't really look at that anymore. A lot is taken for granted. Obviously, we've created so many abstraction layers.
Yeah.
And AI is another one,
Yeah.
arguably. But if you don't understand what in the end the CPU is doing,
Yeah.
how can you optimize? How can
Yeah.
you figure out where the problem is, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen young people that are intrigued about how things work
Yeah.
be more successful. I pride myself as a young Dennis.
Yeah.
I, unlike my friends, they were playing games. I wanted to know how the game was built.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So at the Commodore 64, I was,
Yeah.
building
Making it.
in
Yeah.
these like unlimited lives or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
spacebar, skip level.
Yeah, fine, fair enough. That's going to be so relatable to so many of our listeners. Cool. So, and we started the conversation with a question from our previous guest. What question would you like to ask our next guest?
Yeah, so as I understand, David is in the private equity space. Intriguing topic, in my opinion. I believe a lot of acquisitions in the space often are made while the technology has not been assessed well enough.
Yep.
Probably David does it really well.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know how often, or if maybe you can talk about a case where a situation where a bad architecture actually contributed to a bad due diligence and not investing in
Okay.
the thing, while the numbers played out well, right? That's what
Yeah.
the private equity guy will be looking at, right? Massive margins,
Yeah.
that system.
Yeah.
So,
Or where they did invest and got it wrong.
yeah,
Yeah.
in hindsight, David was right.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have invested, for
Fine.
example,
Okay.
because of tech.
Brilliant.
I think it happens a lot more
Yeah.
often.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure I ask David. So, sadly, Dennis, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for this discussion. It's been brilliant. Been really, really interesting and great chatting to you about, all things architecture excellence. So, once again, thanks for your time. Thanks for an excellent podcast episode.
Thank you, Mario. Talk soon. And to everybody in the audience, great listening.
And that's a wrap on another episode of Transformational Blueprints. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found plenty of insights and takeaways to fuel your journey. If you enjoyed the episode, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could share it, leave a review, or give us a like. It helps us reach more people in the industry who can benefit from these conversations. Don't forget to follow Synaxia Group on LinkedIn to stay updated on new episodes. The links are in the show notes. Join us next time for more tips, strategies, and stories from some of the brightest minds in technology and transformation. Until then, take care and keep transforming.